Hello, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make 2D billboard avatars in worlds.com. So normally most avatars are in RWX, which is a 3D modeling format, but if you have a non-VIP account, you can't use RWX models, which are 3D. That's a VIP only feature that you have to pay for. But you can still have custom avatars if you're on a non-VIP account, if they're 2D, if they're billboards. And to do that, you need to create an MOV file. Now, these aren't the same MOV files like QuickTime videos. These are actually like a custom texture format that Worlds uses. And the tool you need to make these doesn't have any documentation. It took some fiddling with to figure out. It took me hours just to figure this out, and I figured I would make this video to show people since I didn't really find any other instructions. I also just want to thank Werla for and AEE Cath for showing me how to do this or helping me with it. And so one of the first things you're going to need is you're going to want to have a 32-bit version of Windows. And the reason for this is because while the main compiler itself, or I shouldn't call it a compiler, the main image converter itself will run fine. Comp.img, that's the command line tool. And you will have to use the command line for this, by the way. There is no GUI. There is a GUI for comp view, though, which you can use to take a look and make sure it worked. Um, there's a file in here. There's a binary in here called... So this file, while the main thing itself can run in 64-bit mode, this cannot. And what this file does is it converts the colors in your image. So if your image is not I don't know what the exact specifications are, but I assume it's if it has any opacity in the image and if it's not 256 colors. So if it doesn't meet that criteria, and I could be wrong, I'm just guessing. If it doesn't meet that criteria, then the main converter will ask this program to convert the colors. And this program does not work on 64-bit Windows. So if you were using 64-bit Windows, you're going to need to make a virtual machine and make sure the virtual machine I would recommend is nothing before Windows Vista. The tool will work on modern Windows, but I would strongly suggest you use it on either 98 or XP, preferably, because XP just has a better command line. It's going to save you a lot of time. Another thing I would do is probably write your command in a batch file if you know how to do that, so that if you do make a mistake, then you don't have to retype it. This is if you're on Windows 98. On Windows XP, you probably don't need to do this because there's the command history. You can just press up or down and redo the same command if you make a minor mistake. But with that out of the way, first thing we're going to do is we're going to need our images. So here's the first one I did. So the first thing is transparency. The first thing we need to understand is transparency. So if I open up my Worlds client here and I switch in, if I open up Shaper real quick and I switch my avatar to be, as you can see right here, it is not transparent because there is no transparency pixel, but the original image is transparent. If we go ahead and look at this right here, this image is, okay, open on my other monitor. I'm sorry about that. Let me open it in paint.net. As you can see, yeah, it is transparent. And the reason for this is the MOV format does not support transparency, at least not in the same way that your modern image formats would. So this image right here, the transparent pixels aren't being read. This top pixel right here is being interpreted as just solid white. So what's going to happen is it's either going to not add any transparency at all, or if it does pick up this top left pixel as solid white, then it's going to take every other white pixel and turn that invisible, which is going to make this look really, really ugly. Notice how in all these images I have the entire background set to purple, and there's a reason for that. So if I open this in paint.net again, you can see these colors that I'm using, mostly just reds and maybe some artifacting from the downsizing it from super sampling because it is bilinear filtered. Um, for the most part, it's just pastel reds, some desaturated colors, some grays, some whites, some blacks. Their pink is nowhere to be found in this image. So what happens is it takes the top left pixel and it says, okay, so this is pink. So every other pink pixel in this image needs to be invisible. There is no translucency. It's either there's a pixel there, there's no pixel there. So now you know how that works. And if we go ahead, and I'm just gonna open up my files here. This is the one. So if we go ahead and link it to this, as you can see, this is what happens when you don't have proper transparency. So what happened here is the converter interpreted the top left pixel as solid white, and because this image has so much white in it, um, the entire thing just turns invisible. So it just looks like a garbled mess, and you don't want that. So how we work around this is we take our transparent image, and let me just open this up in paint.net so you can see what I did here. And I have two layers. Well, okay, the only reason I did two layers was because I was trying to work around the super sampling, because if you do super sampling on one layer, then it's going to... I'll explain that later. But you'll see here what I did was I picked a background color that was not used anywhere else in this image. This entire image is blacks, purples, whites, more purples, reds, pinks, stuff like that. So rather smartly, I picked green because that is probably the furthest from all these colors that you can possibly get. And so then what I did was you want to make sure that the top left pixel matches the background color. So that way, when the converter reads it, it knows, okay, this is invisible. And then what else I did is, because we're downsizing this image, the super sampling is probably going to cause some artifacting, and it's going to blend that with the background color, or it's going to blend it with a transparency and create this weird white outline or green outline, which you don't want because that is going to show in the final product. So what I did here was I took the original, so I took the green background and cut it out and put it on a separate layer on top. You can do this in GIMP, you can do it in Photoshop, you can do it, I think, in Krita too, but right now I'm using paint.net because it's simpler. Um, and then what I did was, because this has a black outline already, I decided to use black as the main background. And then what I did is I used this magic wand tool. I select this, or I think, yeah, you want to select a color. Any of the colors here, you can adjust the tolerance percentage here, which will adjust what is considered the same object and what isn't. You want to do it so that not the entire square is selected, but just the main object in the center. And then what I ended up doing was I ended up pasting that on the top layer. So that gives us a black anti-aliasing, which blends well with the transparency and actually looks good. Um, Instead of just having this green fade everywhere, which is really, really ugly. So, and another requirement you're going to have to meet is with the image resolution. So the maximum resolution is 256 by 256, and it has to be, as far as I'm aware, it has to be a perfect square, and it has to be a power of 2. This is pretty common practice for video game textures. So it has to be a power of 2, like 64px, 128px. 128px is probably the preferred resolution for 2D avatars, but the max you can go is 256. And the ending file also has to be in BMP format, which is Microsoft bitmaps. It's a lot like PNG, but it's not as common. So most of the images that you have here, you are going to have to convert into a bitmap file, BMP. And once that's done, you're also going to want to have 8 frames. So if you're taking snapshots of a 2D object, or sorry, a 3D object, and you're using like a lasso tool to like cut out like 2D snippets of that, you're going to want to have 8 angles. You can use the same image on more than one frame, but there's 8 frames and one for each direction. So one for each cardinal direction. There's 8 directions. There's 4 diagonal, 4, I think, like 2 front and back, 2 left and right. Kind of like the Doom sprites. If you've ever played Doom before, that's kind of how this works. Yeah, so you're going to want to have all that ready. And what I did, if we go ahead and open up this folder, which is where all my textures are at, and this isn't my character, by the way. This is someone else's on Discords. Shout out to Serial. But as you can see, I have let's see, frame 0 through 7, so that's 8 frames, and they're all different perspectives of this character. I don't know why I have 2 frame 6s. Okay, that's a different file format. So yeah, we have 8 frames, So once you have all those files prepared, what you're going to do is save all those. I already have mine saved. So we're going to open up our 32-bit Windows. The reason I have two virtual machines is because my XP is 64-bit, so it won't run this. And once we have our file, we're going to go ahead, create our batch file. Going to do compimg.exe. We're going to do -C255, which tells our converter to do 255 colors, or I think that's our, I don't know. And then we do R-0, sorry, -R0, -F0, and then dash, you can leave out the -15.3. I don't know what that does. I think that's just, um, I think that's picking the color. Yeah, you can leave that out if you want. I don't know. .ow, .emov, .emov is going to tell it to convert to an MOV. And then we're going to do -M, capital M. Make sure it's a capital. That is very important. And then after this, you're going to want to have the name of the output file. And so right here it's serial spin, and there's no spaces. You cannot have any spaces, no backslashes, nothing like that. You can have underscores, but you don't want to have underscores because, or dashes, because the Worlds player won't work well with that. I don't know why. Worlds engine is very picky. But as you can see, if we scroll through here, we have a serial spin .mov, which is our output file. So here we have our name of our file, and then after that we want -t, and then you want plus, and then the name of a text file, and this text file is going to tell it, is going to list all of the names of all the different frames of animation in order. And this is very important that you get this in the right order, or else the angles won't be correct. So here I have, actually, if I open up the MOV viewer in my XP machine here, we open up the Pango sprite. As you can see, it's, so if we right click, we go forward a frame, left click, go back a frame. So frame 2 is the, I think, diagonal, like northwest view, and then there's west, southwest, south, southeast, yada yada. So it's turning clockwise, and that is very, very important that you do that correctly, or else it won't be in the right angle. So as you can see here, if we go to our image here, we start with frame 2, which is forward, and then we go frame 3, frame 4, frame 5, frame 6, frame 7, and then, so that's turning clockwise, and then frame 0 and frame 1 are the last two. It's very, very important you get that in the right order. And once that's done, once you have all that set up, and by the way, if you have file extensions turned off, make sure you don't accidentally add a file extension to the file name, or else it's going to be .txt, and that's going to cause problems. But once that's done, and you have your text file with the list of your different sprites or textures in your batch, going to open this and wait until the title bar says finished. On some systems, it might just close out right away. If it does that, that's fine. And you should see a file pop up called whatever it is. And just to make sure this worked properly, we're going to go ahead, open CMP view, open serial spin. And as you can see, if we right click, it should turn clockwise, which is good because that means we did it in the right order. But more importantly, and this is going to be very, very important, go into transparent color from the image tab and pick a color, because that is your way to make sure that the transparency actually works. This sets the window background, and if it changes properly and there's no artifacting on the sides, then that means you're ready to go. And the final step is moving this to your desktop. I already have that set up, so I'm just going to suspend the virtual machine. So here I have my file, and you're going to host this on a web server so others can see it. Not every web server will work. It depends on how the web server is set up. My web server would not work because of some domain or IP connection settings or whatever. But there is a website called Worlio where you can sign up and upload your own files. You do need to have admin clearance, or sorry, you need to have an admin approve your account for uploading. So you're going to have to ask Worlio about that. But once you do, you can go here, you can click upload, and I already have my file uploaded, so I'm not going to do this. But once you upload this here, I'm going to go to your files on the side here, go to wherever your avatar is, right click, and then to set your avatar to that, You're going to want to open up Shaper, and I assume you already have Shaper open or set up. If you don't, you can read a guide on that on Jimbly's website. I'll link that in the description. Going to open Console from the hierarchy, and this is Console is like your client settings. So we're going to go over here on our properties, going to set the avatar to the position or the location of our. And by the way, don't leave the HTTPS in there. Worlds does not support TLS encryption, so if it has HTTPS, you need to change that to HTTP so that it's unencrypted and it should read properly. And once that's done, there we go. Yep, that's all you need to do. If this was hard to follow, I'm gonna go ahead and recap all the requirements. So you need to have the background be a solid color that's not used by the original image, and this is going to be used for your transparency. You're going to want to use a batch file, and in this batch file, you need to have a specific set of arguments. If you missed those, go back to that part of the video. It needs to be no bigger than 256 by 256. It needs to be a square. It needs to be a power of 2, and it needs to be in a bitmap format. And that should be about it. That should be all the requirements. And just in case, again, if your image doesn't meet the color requirements, it will try to convert it to meet the requirements. So, and that converter does require 32-bit Windows. It will not run on 64-bit Windows. So if you do run into that problem, install like Windows 98 or something in a virtual machine, and that should be about it. It's pretty easy from there.